Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. As always, I want to engage in conversations about how Christianity engaged with the Roman Empire and how God used that otherwise pagan empire that was steeped in a lot of natural law principles to bring about the expansion of the Christian faith as we know it today. Joining me to have a conversation about this is Dr. Paul DeHart, professor of political science of Texas State University in San Marcos, author of The Social Contract in the Ruins by University of Missouri Press, and other books. Paul, great to speak with you. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
Oh, I'm well. Thanks for having me. Real privileged to be here again.
I always enjoyed when we get to reconnect. So, the return of the sacral king. What on earth does it mean to say that Christianity subverted the Roman Empire and the modern state?
Yeah, so I think there's this interesting parallel. If we look back into the deep recesses of antiquity, we see what scholars, especially folks like Frank Oakley, Henri Frankfurt, and some others, we'll talk about what we call cosmic religiosity, this idea of sacral kingship, in which we have regimes all over the place, especially in the ancient Near East, in which the king is the high priest is the king. There's no distinction, much less separation, between what we'd call a church and state. The political order, the kingship exists for religious purpose. The king exists to perform those rites that maintain cosmic harmony and civic harmony. And then there is this sort of this exceptional period that scholars call the Republican parenthesis, in which we see the flowering of these Greek cities, polis. We have different kinds of regimes, and they're not all kingship, but they are still regimes in which you have a unity of the sacred, if you will, and the political or civil government. And we see that in the Roman Republic, even before the Roman Empire. In the Roman Republic, we see that the highest officials are also priests, and that the highest religious offices are civil offices. Case in point, in the Roman Republic, one of the highest religious and civil offices is Pontifex Maximus. Pontiff means bridge builder. The highest priest of the pontiff class is the Pontifex Maximus, the bridge builder between Rome and the Pantheon. Julius Caesar greases some palms as he's rising to get the title Pontifex Maximus. When the Republic falls and the empire rises, we see Octavian, Caesar Augustus, taking the title Pontifex Maximus, as well as he's now emperor, imperator of Rome. And there's a kind of return here then of sacral kingship. But even in the Republican phase, we had a sacral republic. Now, with Christianity, we have the emergence of we have the advent of Christ, who is priest and king, and we have the emergence of a new association called the ecclesia, and it's got its own administration for religious rituals, and it doesn't behave like it's accountable to Rome. You think about Rome as Rome expands, Roman civil officials monitoring various religious cults, including the Bacchus cult, which they eventually stamp out, but other religious cults as well, and to decide, hey, what are we going to keep this one around? Is it okay? Even the chief priest is appointed by Pilate, for instance. But then when Christianity comes around, I want to say in particular Western Christianity, there's this emerging sense that the church is one thing. It is entrusted with the highest things, the supernatural good of man on the one hand, and that the civil government, though important, is a separate administration. So much so that when the emperor from the East comes to Ambrose's church and thinks he's going to help serve Eucharist, Ambrose tells him to go wait with the ordinary congregants. After Constantine the Great, there's something of a dispute about imperial authority and Christianity between Constantius II And Hosius of Cordoba, who was the advisor at Nicaea, a spiritual advisor to Constantine the Great, and Hosius is telling Constantius, you need to stay out of this. This area isn't given to you. And Pope Gelasius in 494 and 496, I'm thinking in particular of the bond of anathema against Emperor Anastasius. Anastasius was trying to insist for unity in the empire that Gelasius readmit some churches, I believe monophysite churches, that were back into communion with the See of Rome. And Gelasius was refusing to do that. And he first writes a letter in which he says, hey, there are two powers by which the world is governed, the so-called Two Swords letter. And Anastasius keeps pressing, and Gelasius eventually anathematizes him. And when he does, he writes in the fourth tractate of the Bond of Anathema this passage that captures the ancient sacral political union of the polytheistic religious order, kingship and republic, and then rejects it, says Christianity rejects it. And a passage, if I could read this really quickly, Gelasius says, it happened before the coming of Christ, so before the Advent, that certain men, though still engaged in carnal, say secular activities, were symbolically both kings and priests. Sacred history even tells us about Melchizedek, who was such a one. And the devil imitated this among his own people, for he always strives in a spirit of tyranny to claim for himself what pertains to divine worship. So pagan emperors were called supreme pontiffs. But when he came, Christ, who was true king and true priest, the emperor no longer assumed the title of priest. And that no longer assumed as sort of a normative ought no longer, nor did the priest claim the royal dignity. For Christ, mindful of human frailty, regulated with an excellent disposition what pertained to the salvation of his people. Thus he distinguished between the offices of both powers, priestly and kingly, according to their own proper activities and separate dignities. And he goes on to say that as a result of this, the emperor should stay out of the administration of religious affairs, of doctrine, of things like that. And on the other hand, that the soldier of God should not be involved in the administration of secular affairs, so that, he says, quote, the humility of each order, two separate orders, would be preserved, neither being exalted by the subservience of the other. Each profession would be especially fitted for its appropriate functions. Now, I think this is a kind of normative doctrine. I think it probably underpins the resolution of lay investiture in 1000. But if we move forward to modernity and the doctrine of sovereignty, we see someone like Thomas Hobbes, who is aware of all this. And Hobbes has this doctrine that there is one sovereign, be it a king, an aristocratic or democratic assembly, one sovereign power that ought to possess both civil and ecclesiastical authority, and that the sovereign power is indivisible, and separating civil and ecclesiastical authority is divided sovereignty, imperium and imperio. It'll lead to the dissolution or the weakening of a commonwealth. And so Hobbes says sovereign power requires that the sovereign is above law, law is the command of the sovereign, and the unified authority over church and state. And he says that pagan kings, by virtue of conversion to Christianity, should never have been understood to have given up being the highest priest of their kingdom or of their commonwealth. And he says that, in fact, the civil sovereign must be understood as the supreme pastor, not only with the power, he said, or the authority to baptize, and however he construes Christian authority there, but also with the authority to determine doctrine, to ordain, and to perform any ritual, even if hands have never been laid on him. So Hobbes wants to remarry what Christianity sundered, and Rousseau comes along and says Hobbes is the only Christian writer to have ever gotten it right. The two heads of the eagle must be united.
Let's pause there, Paul. I think that's a good stopping point for now. We are at the break talking with Professor Paul DeHart, Professor of Political Science at Texas State University, about Christians in the Roman Empire. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter. Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Freedom, talking with Dr. Paul DeHart, Professor of Political Science of Texas State University in San Marcos. And we're talking about, effectively, the Christian social engagement of the Roman Empire and the modern state, and how, frankly, the Christian doctrine subverted the Roman social theology, if you will, and social operations in the modern state. Paul, let's pick up where we left off, because you were just highlighting how there were social orders that obviously did not align with the Christian worldview, and there was suspicion against the Christians because their allegiance would be to Christ first, and only then would they be good citizens of the Republic, and yet because of that they made exemplary citizens.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think there claims to be good citizens in a proper understanding of citizenship. The thing is that the Romans viewed religion as the glue of the empire. So the only gods on offer really are the gods of the empire, the gods of the pantheon. Now, they might be willing to add other gods to that under supervision, as long as you didn't deny those gods. They grant the Jewish exception, but then you might say that Rome sort of comes to regret that. They march tens of thousands of soldiers into Israel. And I'm reminded of this a statement of Rousseau. Rousseau, and I don't think he gets this exactly right, but he says that into this world, what Rousseau saw as a unified world, and he wanted back into this unified world in which you had these polytheistic divinities and the gods that were on offer. Walks Jesus Christ preaching a kingdom that is not, its origins aren't from that world. And Rousseau understands it to be sort of, well, a kingdom in another world. But at any rate, Rousseau sees Christianity as sundering what ancient polytheism and Rome in particular had wedded. And he says Christianity separates these things, and Hobbes is the only one to realize that they should be unified among Christian writers, and the two heads of the eagle should be reunified. And he says the only thing that Hobbes gets wrong is he thinks that's compatible with Christianity, so it's got to go. I'm in terms of higher allegiance. What's really comes to mind is the story of Polycarp, who's a bishop in the Christian church, who is a citizen of Rome, and who is considered the destroyer of the gods because he's, as a Christian, Jupiter's not a god, the pantheon's not a god. And the Romans, like the ancient Athenians, think the gods of the empire, the gods of the polis, those are the only gods on offer. That's what unifies the empire. And if you don't worship those, you're dissolving the glue of the empire. And Polycarp is called to the stadium by the Roman proconsul there in Smyrna, Statius Quadratus. And he says to him, I need you to do something to prove your allegiance to Rome. I need you to revile Christ, to swear by the genius of the Psyche, the guardian spirit of Caesar. And then those Christians in the Colosseum there say, away with the atheists. And Polycarp says, you want to talk about Christianity, appoint a day, and I'll persuade you. And the proconsul says, no, persuade the people in the Colosseum here. And Polycarp says, I don't consider them worthy of persuasion. And ultimately, he points to the people in the stadium and he says, away with the atheists. And he says, I have served Christ my King for 80 years. And I cannot renounce that allegiance. I cannot act contrary to that allegiance. And as he's saying that there are two allegiances in competition here. It's not that these allegiances have to be in competition, but the way that this Roman official and Rome itself often understands the gods and the function they serve. Here is Polycarp in contradiction, and he says, okay, in that case I have a king who is above Caesar, a king of kings, a lord over Caesar, and I am not willing to bend the knee to Caesar equally or above Christ. And so we have, in this case, a conflict precisely because Rome is saying the gods of the empire are the glue. It's analogous to Socrates, where he is indicted for not acknowledging the gods of the city and introducing new divine things, his divine voice, and for corrupting the youth. And some people sometimes say, well, that was political rather than religious, but that's not how the ancient mind thought. They wouldn't have divorced those things. And so I start off the Return of the Sacral King with this quotation from Bardason of Edessa in the Book of the Law of Countries. Peter Brown cites it. In whatever place they, Christians, may find themselves, the local laws cannot force them to give up the law of the Messiah. So they are committed to the laws of the Messiah above, where the local laws are compatible with natural law and the requirements of justice, then due authority is owed. Christianity authorizes legitimate public authority, but it also puts in place not only the moral law above that, but also the law of Christ and obedience to Christ. And so Christianity, in a way, introduces contending allegiances. And I think in this sense, Rousseau is descriptively right that Christianity sunders something that was wed in polytheistic ancient Near Eastern, classical Greek, Roman Republican, and Roman imperial polity. They were sacral regimes. Christianity sunders that, but Rousseau is wrong to think that is he's normatively wrong to think that that's a bad thing. Yes, it poses a challenge if we reify political order, if we take political order to be sacral. But what Christianity does is to say political order doesn't aim at the highest good. It aims at a real natural good. It performs an important function. But the highest thing, which in some ways is what the Roman Republic aspired to, it doesn't have control of those things.
You highlight such a crucial point that I want to invite you to speak deeper into, that you're right, the political order by itself serves proximate ends, but because of the all-encompassing Christian worldview, we understand that even when proximate ends, immediate ends, are served virtuously under the aspect of God, then all these things add up into the common good and the overarching journey to serving the Lord in the ultimate good.
Yes, I think that's right, and the jurisdictional separation of church and state and the administrative separation of these things does not need to require hostility or opposition. It can when the state takes on too much. For that matter, like Jacques Maritain, I'm opposed to the use of the word sovereignty, a word coined in the 13th century by French legates, that sovereignty means almost literally overrule or above rule. And Christianity is the rule of law all the way down. As my friend Havliarchus likes to say, it's not someplace outside of law. It's law all the way down. And so political order has a legitimate purpose. I take it to be authorized by both the moral law, but also by Christ. The Caesar's coin incident, whose image is on that coin, render to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God the things that are God's. Well, everything in the world, the whole earth is the Lord's. Everything belongs to God. There's nothing that God does not own. And as Frank Beckwith and some others would like to say, who is it that bears God's image? We do. We're made in the image of God. But at the same time, that passage has been taken to recognize that political order, political rule, has a place in the divine economy. And what Galatius is saying is that God has entrusted the highest things to the church. He's entrusted important things to political order, and those are distinct and different. They don't need to be opposed on the one hand, but on the other hand, if those in power claim too much, then it is the job of Christians, of the church, to say, to an extent, it's a kind of judgment. This far shall you come, and no farther. Christ says to the apostles, "You shall judge the nations," and I think that is saying that the church should call the nations to account, hold the nations to the bar, as it were, but that political order and its administration is one thing and a good thing, oriented towards a natural good, and Christianity aims at our supernatural good, and these are not in any way opposed to each other, and for that matter, grace perfects nature on the one hand, but on the other hand, there is a distinction, and there's a distinction as to who's in charge of these different things. And I think that modern sovereignty doesn't want to recognize that. Modern sovereignty wants to consolidate everything under one sovereign power. Christianity is intransigently opposed to that.
Paul, as usual, a tremendous joy. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thanks for having me. Always a privilege.
My guest has been Paul DeHart, Professor of Political Science of Texas State University, and he's been reminding us that even the political order belongs to Jesus Christ. Christians, we vote and pray in the light of Christ. I'm Marcus Peter.